Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Colonna, and this is Nashville. Longtime listeners of the show know that I don't shy away from dating myself. So let's go back to the summer of 1992. I had just finished up my freshman year of college and was working a gig at the local movie theater. Probably the most anticipated movie that year was A League of Their Own. The film starring Tom Hanks, Madonna, and Rosie O'Donnell was an instant hit. I loved it. So you can imagine my excitement when Amazon announced that they were releasing a series based on that. That would give us even a deeper look at the All-American Girls Professional Baseball Leagues. That series debuts today, and later this hour we'll learn more about it and some great women baseball players from right here in Tennessee. But first, for 157 years, Harpeth Hall has been dedicated to all-girls education. Recently, the school has been wrestling with how to address non-binary and trans students who have publicly announced their gender identities, leading to pressure from students and the public for Harpeth Hall to make a public statement on their policy. My guests are here today to talk about that issue. I'd like to introduce Motycka, and from the Nashville Scene, and Hallie Graham, former WPLN intern and senior at Harpeth Hall. Welcome to This Is Nashville. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thanks you so much.
So Hallie, let me start with you. You've been at Harpeth Hall since you were in the 5th grade. How is all of this hitting you?
Yes, I've been at Harpeth Hall for 7 years now, going into my 8th year. And I will say, after all my time there, it is a bit of a surprise, but I'm interested to see how the school deals with it from here.
What have your peers and your students been saying about this?
There are a lot of different opinions circulating, to be completely honest, but what I can say for certain is that students are talking about it in a lot of different realms. I was just at dinner, a casual dinner with my friends the other night, and right after the news came out, and we were all talking about it just in sort of like a friendly circle. So this is definitely not just at school. It's definitely not in the classroom. I know students are talking about it almost, in their homes, with their parents, with their families, and with their friends too.
Now, Eli, for your story on the scene, you spoke with alums and parents. What have they told you?
They have told me, I think similar to what we just heard, that it's a complicated conversation, that they're trying to evaluate whether, in some cases, the school is the right place for their children to remain if their child is coming out as non-binary or trans. Alums have reflected on their time, some of whom who have come out after leaving Harpeth Hall, their time at Harpeth Hall and the education that they got, and which many reflect very fondly on, especially praising teachers and faculty, but really reflecting on the ideas of femininity and the culture at Harpeth Hall and the way that intersected with their relationship to their gender.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about other all-girls schools in the area? Are they addressing gender diversity as well? Yes, Eli.
St. Cecilia, as far as I know, you may know, Hallie, St. Cecilia is the only other all-girls high school or historically women's high school in Nashville. MBA is the historically male school and kind of a counterpart to Harpeth Hall. They do a lot of things together. And I got no comment from St. Cecilia or MBA functionally. I think I wrote in the story, both got back to me with something like, we're not dealing with this, we're not addressing this. And I think that's just as important a story as the fact that Harpeth Hall has decided to talk about gender diversity is that these other schools haven't. And it doesn't mean that these aren't issues that students aren't that students at those schools are surely facing these issues as anyone is, issues about gender identity and questions about gender identity, but those schools have not come out with any kind of gender diversity statement and don't really seem interested in even talking to anyone about it publicly.
Now, Hallie, last year, the school newspaper published an op-ed that calls for the official recognition of trans students. How did that op-ed resonate with you?
With me personally, I have been at Harpeth Hall, like I said, for 7 years. My experience at Harpeth Hall has been overwhelmingly positive. You may know Harpeth Hall is known for their Campbell plaid skirts, and it's sort of our symbol of our school. And I take immense pride in wearing that skirt to school every day. But I will say that part of the reason why I love Harpeth Hall is the culture centered around teachers being able to say things like, hey girls, or hey ladies. And I think that one of the reasons why I chose Harpeth Hall and why I continue to love Harpeth Hall and my education there is because of that environment. And while I'm a part of the paper, and I'm glad that our school newspaper is willing to publish people's opinions, whatever they may be, and even if they're as strong as that opinion was. But for me, I like the culture at Harpeth Hall the way it is right now, as I've had a wonderful experience there, and I value my education there so far higher than a lot of other things in my life.
Eli, how did school administration respond to that op-ed?
There are some, you should read it. It's on Logos, the school paper that Hallie writes for. Jess Hill, the head of school, responded in that article, and so I encourage everyone to go read it. Do you want to know how to that article specifically, or how they responded to my?
Yeah, to that article specifically, and what they said to you about it when you talked to them.
They said something very similar to the statement that they released, which is that there have been many years of ongoing conversations about gender diversity at Harpeth Hall. This was probably a couple weeks ago that I first contacted the school in my reporting, and they were not ready to release at that point what they've released since, which is this gender diversity philosophy that we both have in front of us right now. So at that point, they were kind of just explaining that it was something that they were taking really seriously, that they were discussing with students and families at that point, the language was on a case-by-case basis, and that's been further clarified with this statement that they've made since then. So I don't want to say that that's still their position, but it was, an ongoing conversation was the way that they had responded to the students, as far as I know. But Hallie may know, within the school, maybe they were responding differently. And then I also did learn that they had changed part of the school dress code to allow pants, which is something that they had allowed at a previous point in Harpeth Hall's history. And some students kind of thought that that was also a response to calls for a more gender inclusive environment. How
did the dress code allowance affect students?
As far as I can tell, in the school's history, there have been a lot of occasions where pants have been an option, as well as also skirts as an alternative to a skirt. The students sort of knew that the pants decision was coming, I think, because there's been a lot of talk about that amongst students. But I would put these two decisions in separate categories. I think that coming out with the gender diversity philosophy is a little bit different than just adding pants to a list of clothing items that students can choose from. I would say that they are certainly in two separate buckets.
Now, you're a student reporter. Do you have any questions for Eli?
I would say, just like you said, as a young person in the communications field, just on the journalism side of this, how do you think Harpeth Hall has been treated by the media? And do you think the response has been fair to the philosophy?
It has been appalling to see the way that particularly conservative cultural propaganda has twisted the story and reduced it to a kind of culture war. Specifically, there was coverage by Fox News and I think some other smaller conservative sites recently in the past 48 hours. In my reporting, I really was wrestling with this question too, because on the one hand, it is a really important story for the city and for parents, prospective parents and current parents, to hear from an entity other than just the school about how the school environment is being crafted and treated within Harpeth Hall. But on the other hand, like I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, Harpeth Hall is one of three gendered educational private institutions in Nashville, along with St. Cecilia and MBA. And St. Cecilia and MBA have chosen to just not deal with this at all. And I think that Harpeth Hall has stepped out and attempted to start a process to address it. They've been going through a process to address it. And I think that comes with the brunt of the scrutiny, while MBA and St. Cecilia are just choosing not to wade into it. Even if they think that it's not an issue within their student body, it doesn't mean that they don't need to come out with gender diversity, or they don't need to address it at all. So I think that the fact that Harpeth Hall has stepped out and addressed it has exposed them to a lot of criticism without that same kind of scrutiny being brought to MBA and or St. Cecilia. And MBA specifically is a much wealthier male school that has escaped a lot of scrutiny for this too.
Mm-hmm. Now, Hallie, you mentioned that you want to keep things the way that they've been, but can you see the perspective of where others are coming from?
Oh, absolutely. That's part of what Harpeth Hall has taught me, and that's where that's part of my pride in my education, is that I'm able to have constructive and intelligent conversations with others, and I appreciate the stance of the other two schools, being St. Cecilia and MBA. I understand why they haven't stepped out because of all the scrutiny Harpeth Hall has received. And just insularly for Harpeth Hall, I understand why Harpeth Hall has joined the conversation. I mean, prospective parents and with prospective students need to hear this, but also, I mean, I appreciate as a current family and as a current student at Harpeth Hall them coming out with this, but I do wish that they would give some clarity on this issue at Harpeth Hall. I appreciate this first step, but I do look for more honesty in the coming days.
Now, Eli, what are you keeping an eye on as the story develops?
What we just heard, that's the number one thing that I've heard from anyone who's reached out to me or who I've talked to, sources for this, is that they're just hoping to have some sort of clarity. They're still, even with the statement, I've heard from a lot of folks, parents, alums, about what they feel like is the ambiguity with the statement. They're not sure whether this is inclusive of trans students, trans male students, or trans female students, or non-binary students. There's so many questions still out there, like we just heard, and I think that's what I'm focused on. There have been a lot of Zoom calls, from what I've heard, with students and with alums and parents, and that has, from who I've talked to, in some cases, just added more ambiguity, that they've felt like some parents specifically have walked away and contacted me and said they feel like there's even more potentially contradictory things being said, or just more ambiguity from those calls. And so we're just trying to figure out, it's a long process, it's a difficult process. A lot of historically women's colleges specifically have gone through this process and come out in different places. But it's about clarity, and it's about standing behind a decision that you make and having good reasons and about why you made that decision, and communicating that to everyone.
Okay, clarity is the top of the list. That is Eli Motycka from the Nashville Scene. He was joined by Hallie Graham, a senior at Harpeth Hall. Eli and Hallie, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks.
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we set our eyes on the All-American Girls Baseball League. The new series, The League of Their Own, tells the story of that league, and it premieres today. We'll meet a cast member and talk with the Nashville writer whose work helped inform the show. Are you a woman who plays baseball? Do you love the game? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. Today, Amazon released their new series, A League of Their Own, which follows the journey of the All-American Girls League during World War II. Max Chapman, played by Shantae Adams, is determined to play baseball, a dream that sometimes puts her in direct conflict with her mother, Toni. In one scene, Max has been caught trying out for the baseball team after saying she was going to a Duke Ellington concert. Let's listen.
Yes, I went to the tryouts.
So you lied to me.
If you knew already, why you have to do this in front of the whole salon?
Well, they don't care.
No, we love it. I said, obviously, she went to those tryouts. I knew it all
You did not. I said that.
I was telling you about it.
No, you didn't. It was Thursday.
Okay, you can stop.
Didn't I say it?
Stop.
How you know, Mama?
Guy told us. He came in here with some leftovers his mama made him. He didn't want to waste that good pork.
Guy.
Oh, that pork is delicious.
Now, Maxine, you've got to make some smarter choices.
I'm making the best
Once
choices.
this salon is yours, I will kill you if you lose this business because you're still acting like a child over this baseball nonsense. Even if I'm dead, I will come back and I will kill you.
This is fun.
I have told you before, owning your own business in this country is the only way you can have some control of your life. I'm all for you having a dream, Maxine. I just want you to pick one that's possible.
Well, we have Tony Chapman here with us today, a.k.a. my very own sister, Saida Arica Ekulona. Sai, welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you, Khalil. I'm really honored to be here.
Such an honor to have you. So, in that scene, we hear the tension between mother and daughter. So tell me, why is Tony so dead set against her daughter playing baseball?
Well, Tony is trying to protect her daughter. It's 1943. Segregation is still alive. There's racism, there's sexism, and she wants to protect Max to make sure that she's got a good future. So yes, Max might not be married at that time, but she wants her to have her own business because that's a way for the community to respect her. That's a way for the white community to respect her. That's a way for her to have something of her own that no one can take away from her.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell us more. Tell us more about your character, Tony Chapman.
Well, Tony Chapman, I love her. She's a mother, a wife, and a business owner. She has a very strong relationship with her husband, Edgar. They have a beautiful daughter, Max, who is, she's been given everything that Tony and Edgar did not get. Because they came up from the South during the Great Migration. And I know that Tony wanted to make sure that her daughter had not only everything that she didn't have, but raising her to be an upstanding member of the African-American community in Rockford, because that's important to Tony. Tony's also ambitious. She loves Edgar for loving her for who she is, and she sees her sights on greater things. She doesn't let racism or sexism prevent her from achieving her goals.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've known you for 49 years. I know the answer to this question, but do you share any traits with her?
I don't know. What do you think? Maybe yes.
2 or 3, maybe?
Just 2 or 3, or maybe all. I mean, definitely, we were raised that we can do whatever we wanted, that we were not going to let racism or sexism stand in our way. And I certainly think that each of us have achieved our goals, and we're still achieving our goals no matter what. We are also community oriented. We love having a lot of people around and engaging with people. That's one of the things that you and I were raised with. And that's certainly something that's a characteristic of Tony as well.
Now, how do you approach playing a role like this? What is your process for getting to know who Tony is?
Well, part of it was identifying some of those characteristics. And the other thing was looking into what was happening in 1943 for African Americans and for women. And really it was about how does she handle Max? Max wants to play baseball. Tony thinks that that's just a hobby. It's not a real career. And looking at some female baseball players of the time, like Maybelle Blair, she's been on the tour for the show, and she's just 95. She's a fantastic woman. She's got a bunch of flair with her, and she gave a lot of information to the writers about what it was like playing. And I also looked up Toni Stone, who was the first female to play as a regular on American Big League pro baseball team. And there's also Billy Harris, another African-American player who was known to be a great left-handed pitcher. So it was really just doing some research into what their experience was for me to see how Toni could view Max and how Max wants to go play baseball, but also the social and the societal pressures that prevent Toni from letting Max do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Are you a baseball?
That's part of it.
Are you a baseball fan?
You know, I've been to games. You know, we've been to Oriole games and everything, and some Yankee games. It's a little too long for me, but I do appreciate it socially. You know.
Yes, the social parts of it.
Yes.
I think I know what you're talking about. So,
yes,
yeah. What did you learn about the game of baseball as you played, Toni?
I learned about the unity of the team. From watching the show and reading the scripts, looking at what the girls had to do on the team, the Peaches, how they had to, specify, okay, she's got this strength, she's got that, she's not really great at that, and how they all had to unite in order to play the game well, and also in order to win. I also learned that similar to what we do as actors, and also in my business, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and how do we come together to do a show? Mm-hmm. It's very similar, but the unity, that's the biggest thing I learned.
So tell me, what do you want people to take away from this show?
I want people, there's so many things. I want them to see themselves in it. I want them to see their family members in it. I want them to recognize that women can be funny. I want them to recognize the importance of women and how we've played a huge part in this country's history. I also want people to recognize that this is an expansion from the film in terms that we have African Americans in it. We have people from the queer community in it. Latinas are in it as well. And I want people to remember that when we look back, when we do entertainment pieces about historical times, there are more people in the community than we just see. And I want people to just open themselves up and to see the contributions that all of those groups have actually made, instead of being single-minded on just how, the white community has done something. Everybody was part of it. Like, we're all here together now. So find the connection, find the unity, and also that women can make you laugh. This is comedy. There's some drama in it. I just want people to actually enjoy, and also to recognize women playing baseball, how important that is, and also women in sports outside of just the Olympics. I want us to all just really start going and patronizing, women athletic groups, because they need it just as much. Mm-hmm. See, I told you I had a lot to say.
Yes, you did have a lot to say. Yes. I just remember that one season, that ill-fated attempt that you played softball. I'll never forget it.
Okay, you didn't need to bring that up. I thought this was supposed to be professional. Listen, here's the thing. I wasn't a good runner. And also, I wasn't good at bat, but I was good at field hockey and lacrosse. So yes. I made that up.
Quite good.
Yes.
Hey, and I know you're busy. And you're on set for another show, but is there anything real quick you'd like to share before you go?
Well, first, I am incredibly proud of my brother. I'm also really happy that the show is finally coming out, and I really hope everyone enjoys it.
Well,
I love you.
I love you so much. That is actress Saida Arika Ekalona, my big sister, who plays Toni Chapman on the new series A League of Their Own, which premieres today. Sai, thanks so much for taking time, and thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure, Khalil. I love you. Tell Anika I said hi.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, baby.
Bye. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking this hour about the All-American Girls Baseball League and the women who have made an impact on the game. My next guest wrote a book about it. Anika Orrock is the author and illustrator whose book, The Incredible Women of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, is out now. Anika, welcome back to This is Nashville.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. And that was really fun.
Oh, thanks. That was so much fun. You know, this new Amazon series, it reflects the real-life history of the All-American Girls Baseball League. So let's get into some of that history. You wrote and illustrated this beautiful book that details the lives of the women who played in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Tell me, where'd you get the idea to make the book?
Well, the idea really came from a realization that, you know, I was doing a lot of illustration work and some work in animation, and but a lot of the work I was doing at the time was in baseball, and I was drawing at baseball games and pulling stories from baseball history. It's kind of part of American folklore, you know, John Henry and Paul Bunyan and, you know, these larger than life figures, and it comes from, you know, sort of a nostalgic history and a family connection, which I think a lot of people in America with baseball have. But it really, I'm a visual learner, so I had a visual moment where I was compiling these illustrations for a little book I was going to put together of my baseball work, and realized in the moment that I had hardly any drawings of women, with the exception of like a few fans that were around me in the stands. And it was just this weird realization, because in that moment it was like a million things downloading into my brain, and one of those things was, this is my first realization period of like my own concept of feminism. My you know, I was a girl, I'm a woman, I'm not even representing myself here. And you know, from an artistic standpoint, it's really you know, forgive me, but it's really boring to just have like, you know, the shape language and all that is very like rigid and square and masculine. But really, the things that inspire me to draw are stories, and there's a story in every drawing. And so realizing that I hadn't collected any stories, and I just thought they've got to be out there. For, you know, I love baseball this much, and I want to find something in it that makes me feel connected to it more than just this thing that I grew up listening to. So I went on that journey, and I went to the place that most people go to when they think of such a thing, which is a league of their own. But then it just went from there, and I found those stories that I identified with. I found a lot more stories, and I started finding heroes, and then realizing that, you know, those heroes are everywhere if we look for them.
So as you started looking into the league, tell us, how did the league get started?
Well, the league started as a result of, you know, World War II was like all hands on deck. There was massive mobilization. Women were filling positions that they had never filled before in factories, making ammunition, making ships, also in office positions when, you know, a lot of the population of men went to fight in the war, particularly white men. And then, of course, it was like, again, an all hands on deck thing. So it also became a matter of, we don't have the capacity, you know, we have to set aside certain rules that we've had established, and those rules were kind of temporarily broken. And so women were filling all kinds of positions, including on the ball field. So Philip Wrigley, owner of the Cubs, decided this will be a great moneymaker, and it'll keep, you know, recreation and activity alive and morale. So he kind of used it as a substitute, but he didn't want it to be an inferior substitute. So they sought out real athletes. They paid them sometimes more than their own fathers were making, working in their jobs. You know, they wanted it to be a real professional league for longevity and for entertainment purposes. They knew it would kind of come off as a novelty at first. And they wanted, you know, I guess you could say and some people have said they came for the skirts and the lipstick and the novelty of it, but they stayed for the baseball because it was really good baseball.
So as you're doing research on the book, you discovered some really amazing players, particularly amazing players here in Tennessee. And so I want to start with probably the most famous example, Jackie Mitchell. She wasn't in that league, but she was a famous pitcher who struck out two of baseball all-time greats. Tell me more about that moment.
I feel like Jackie Mitchell is one of the most compelling stories in baseball history for me. She's born in Memphis, but she played she was the only woman on the Chattanooga Lookouts. and the Yankees were coming through on their way from spring training for an exhibition game, and part of their batting lineup was actually known as Murderers Row because it was Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Tony Lazaretti, and they just, they were just lights out every time. And she was only 17 years old, and their starting pitcher wasn't doing so well, so they brought her in, and she struck out Babe Ruth and then proceeded to strike out even more easily Lou Gehrig. And then when she walked Tony, they pulled her and put someone else in. But, it was all these years, it's always been questioned. Was it a publicity stunt? Was it, but research and even Jackie Mitchell herself up to her dying day insisted that was real. And I believe it, all the research I've read and everything, it's pretty great.
What other Tennesseans made an impact on the game?
Oh, wow. What's really, there were several players from the All-American Girls League and chaperones and coaches as well. One of my favorites, the nicknames in the All-American League were great. Her nickname was Bird Dog. Lillian Bird Dog Jackson. She's actually from Nashville. She was an outfielder. She only played, I think, 2 seasons, but, also there's several from Knoxville. Chattanooga is a big baseball town in Tennessee. Lots of players from Chattanooga. Doris Sams from Knoxville. She's like a 5-time All-Star, 2-time Player of the Year. She's one of 2 players in the All-American Girls League to pitch a perfect game, and the other being Jean Fout, who actually pitched 2 perfect games, which she's the only baseball player, man or woman, in history on a professional level to do such a thing. What I find particularly, disappointing, but also fascinating and exciting is the untold, these histories that have been buried and are barely known are, that we're barely finding out about are all of white women. So you can only imagine the histories and the stories that are not told, that we haven't tapped into yet. And when your sister was mentioning Toni Stone, that's one of my favorite stories. Toni Stone actually played in Nashville as part of a barnstorming tour. So she wasn't playing for a team here, but she played through here. But I recently found out that the Southern Negro League was like a major league, like a minor league to the Negro Leagues, the Southern Association. And Georgia May Williams, also from Chattanooga, was the first woman to play on one of those teams. And her story has kind of just been buried like a lot of them, but there's information out there, and it's really fun to dig around here. Since I've moved here, that's been a fun way to connect with my new home, I guess you could say.
Yes, indeed. All right, we have to take a quick break. Coming up, we'll learn more about the impact women have made on and off the field. We'll also look at the future of women in baseball. Are you a woman or girl who plays baseball? We want to hear your stories. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. We've been talking about the women of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League and the legacy the league and players have established. Now we want to look at other women who have influenced the game of baseball. I'd like to introduce my next guest. Andrea Williams is a freelance journalist whose work has appeared in Sports Illustrated and the New York Times. She is the author of the book Baseball's Leading Lady, Effa Manley and the Rise and Fall of the Negro Leagues. Andrea, welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. So, Effa Manley is the only woman inducted into Cooperstown, the Baseball Hall of Fame. Tell us more about her.
Yeah, she co-owned a team, the Newark Eagles, originally the Brooklyn Eagles, with her husband, Abe, and she ran the team. She would have been the business manager or the general manager as we know it today, but she handled all the player contracts and negotiations. When players were looking to re-sign with the organization, they had to go through Effa, not Abe. Abe would scout, but she was in charge of the purse for sure. She, back before everybody had a community relations department or a PR team, she was doing that for her club, making sure the team stayed connected to the Black community. And, they held fundraisers for local chapter of the NAACP. They brought, Black boys in, gave them free tickets to come watch the players so that they could, envision life on the field as well as they got older. So she was ahead of her time in a lot of ways, and I think that's why she's in Cooperstown.
How did you come across her story?
Yeah, I grew up loving baseball, but really wanting to work in a front office. I got my degree in sport management, went back home to Kansas City, and started working at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And on a tour, my very first day, I saw a picture of Effa and Abe and just had lots and lots of questions. The show is about women in baseball and the fact that for the most part, they existed on the margins. So I completely understood that if there's a picture of a woman here, she must have done something phenomenal. So that really kind of kicked off like a 15-year fascination with this woman. And yeah, I was blown away to discover that she was doing a lot of the stuff that I ultimately wanted to do. At the time, my goal was to become a female general manager, the first in Major League Baseball. So I've deviated from that path a little bit, but I'm good with it.
Yes, as are we. Now, you mentioned how significant is it that she played this ownership, and she was an owner, and she played this management role way back when?
Yeah, it's hugely significant, and not just for Effa, not just for her individual career and the fact that she's got a plaque in Cooperstown. I think it really speaks to the significance of the Negro Leagues. She was not the first owner of a team by any means. There were white women who owned teams that inherited them from husbands and fathers and things like that. But, Major League Baseball was very rigid in its culture and the way they did things. And so these women had to bring on, presidents and general managers and people that would actually run the team. So, I've been asked, are there women who existed in Effa's era, who we should have been able to see in Major League Baseball, in the Hall of Fame? And absolutely. And I think if not for the Negro Leagues, we wouldn't even have Effa. She could have been the same person with the same, business skill and savvy and all that. But if not for this entity that existed that really had to make and play by their own rules, she wouldn't have had the opportunities that she had to build this career.
So she was a pretty shrewd business owner, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
So first, real quick, I want to ask you, when did your love of the game transfer into something you wanted to write about professionally?
That's a good question. I always loved it. I always wrote, too. I mean, my mom does not have pictures that I drew as a kid. There were no pictures of houses and birds flying in the sky. It was all short stories and stuff like that. So even in high school, when I started getting this, mind, I'd stopped playing softball then and was, really aware of what was happening, off the field. I'm pouring through ESPN, the magazine. I still have that first cover that came out that had Cordell Stewart on it and Alex Rodriguez.
Okay.
I wanted to do that, but I was also really excited about what was happening off the field. How much, please somebody explain stadium financing deals. What this doesn't make sense to me. It still doesn't really make sense to me, if I'm going to be honest.
Okay.
How much are companies making on, this field signage, and, I would actually do this in-game promotion a different way, and why aren't there more people that look like me at the baseball game? All these different things were super intriguing to me. And then when I married that with the writing, yeah, I think I found my sweet spot a little bit.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking this hour with local authors Andrea Williams and Anika O'Rourke about the legacy of women in baseball. So, when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947 and became the first black player in the major leagues, what were Effa Manley's thoughts? What did she see in the tea leaves about this move?
Yeah, I think Effa, she came to baseball she was a baseball fan. She loved Babe Ruth and the Yankees and, lived in Harlem after high school so she could walk to the Polo Grounds and see them play. But she came from outside of it in a business sense. So she had fresh eyes to the situation. So as we start approaching this era of integration, she kind of understood, just thinking about it purely from a business perspective and not just, I love baseball and I'd love to see a black man play in the majors, or, I love the black community so much, this will be great for our people. She's like, this is going to kill our businesses, straight up. I love the fact that, your sister was talking about her character, telling her daughter, you got to own your own business. That's the only way. And in the 30s, 40s, I mean, we could keep going. 2022. You really need to be in control in this country in order to really be able to make the moves you want to make. If we have seen nothing else, we know that we cannot always wait on white people to get it right. So I think she understood that we were going to be losing perhaps more that we were gaining in just getting this one guy. There was going to be a lot of guys who never got the call. But the managers, the coaches, the people who drove the bus driver, drove the buses, the secretaries, the PR people, they weren't going to get opportunities in the same way if we look at, the desegregation of schools. Mm-hmm. They plucked out a couple kids, but what happened to the teachers? What happened to the principals, the people who were working in those black schools? They didn't get the opportunity to move over. I think she understood that.
Author and illustrator Motycka O'Rourke is still with us. So now when it comes to race, while you were researching the All-American Girls Baseball League, you found some unwritten rules about who they let play, right? I mean, what were some of those rules?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because this was created at a time where it was just even unheard of for women to be playing baseball, they had what was basically called an exacting beauty standard. What do people want to see? What is the standard of, all-Americanness and wholesomeness and beauty? And you look at cosmetics available at the time, you look at everything available at the time, and it's all completely geared toward whiteness. And that was the standard that was set in place for this league. Obviously, you can see it in how they're dressed. You see the lipstick and all of that, but, the talent was there, and that was the core of the motivation of building this league. So clearly that talent exists in other places, and black and brown women were excluded entirely. I started researching that because it became very obvious the more photos I looked at and the more I read about it. And it wasn't talked about, of course, at all. It was just kind of, again, like a visual realization. And as in Major League Baseball, it's a rule. It's a, quote unquote, unwritten rule, which, I think really is just the excuse to say, well, we never actually officially said that it wasn't allowed. It just never, and there's even, I found meeting notes in the archives at the university in South Bend that from the league that basically say, we discourage this, but should a woman, should a black woman show up to tryouts, we'll give her a fair tryout. We won't turn her away. And should she be good enough, then of course we'll make her feel welcome. It's like all these ifs, right? But of course, there's story after story of women that did show up and were turned away and were, and of course I'm sure women didn't show up because they already knew they wouldn't be welcome. And so that was an interesting thing to try to include, particularly when a lot of the people I interviewed were not really very excited to talk about it. Or, when you consider being a white woman from the Midwest in the 40s, you show up to baseball, you're so excited you get to play professionally. Is that even on your radar? Are you even aware of who's on your bus? Probably not. So yeah, it was a tough but interesting thing to research, and it really, really highlights, characters like Maxine in the show and women like Toni Stone in real life who the perseverance and the grit is even that much more astounding because not only did they have a love for it and they were excellent at playing baseball, but they didn't have the one imperative thing that these women had, and that was each other. It was a very lonely road for them, and they still managed to just kick things I can't say on the radio.
It highlights like the need for progress during that time and kind of some of the incremental progress made since then. I mean, Melissa Ludke was a part of a major lawsuit that changed sports media when she sued to have be allowed access to the locker room for post-game interviews after she was denied for being a woman. But that was a moment of progress. But I'd like to ask both of you, what other forms of progress would you like to see? Motycka.
Well, I'd like to see, these ideas of progress and first, that's a huge advancement that was made, but that doesn't mean it was safe or easy or enjoyable for her, as with anyone. And first is a very lonely place to be, and particularly when there isn't someone right behind you. So I think, we're seeing a lot of women advance in baseball in offices and coaching positions. I think what would be really important is to give women and girls the opportunity to play with one another, first of all, and not constantly wonder if we're going to see women in the major leagues. And I think that should start with girls And I think when you're starting with kids and you're moving all the way up through college and into professional level, it's important from the top down and from the bottom up to make sure that everyone is represented, everyone is included, because that's, those things are going to move toward the center and eventually create a bridge.
Andrea.
I would like to see intersectional unity. I think it's important that, you talking about, these white women who were excited to have this opportunity in the 40s, didn't think about the other women that didn't also get the opportunity. I think that speaks so much to how society works and why we are still here in 2022. If you are complicit, even as you're getting your opportunity, if you're complicit in a regime, in a system, in an entity that is still continuing to exclude other people, it's never going to work for you. It's just not. And, we've seen over and over what feminism looks like in this country. It looks like white women. It looks like white women who continue to be upset because they're not really getting everything that they want to get. But they are never really thinking about the people who don't have what they have. So I would like to see us rally together. And I think, honestly, that's the only way anybody's ever going to succeed and be happy.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. I want to ask this question because I'm curious. Both of you, 1 minute. Did either of you play Little League Baseball? Andrea?
I play softball, but not baseball.
Softball, what positions?
I was utility. Like my 10-year-old is all over the field, and I was like, yo, your mom could do it all too. I didn't pitch, though. I could not get the windmill thing going right. Okay. But pretty much everywhere else on the field, yeah.
Okay. Annika?
I played baseball with my family and my dad. I always wanted to play first base because I'm a Giants fan, so I was a big Will Clark fan. But when it came time to actually play, I got to school and softball tryouts were a thing. I was like, but I don't want to play softball. I want to play baseball.
Yeah, they're two totally different games.
Totally different things.
Yeah, when I was in the 6th grade, I was on a championship Little League baseball team. We won like 4 championships in a row. But in that league, in the history of that league, we had the first girl to play on our team, Tara O'Neill, and she was really, really good. Helped us win another championship. I want to give many thanks to my guests, author and illustrator Anika Orrock. She was joined by writer Andrea Williams. Thanks to you both for being with us today in this great conversation.
Thank you.
We've been talking this hour about the legacy of women in baseball. What about the future? Who better to ask than a 13-year-old girl, right? We sent our producer, Rose Gilbert, to meet with Lily Smith.
Baseball means a lot to me. It was the first sport I ever tried out for.
How old were you when you started playing?
I'd say probably about 7 or 8. This is actually a picture of recently when I played, and then the first time I ever played.
Oh, look how little you are.
Yep, I was on the Padres team, and then you can see that I actually still had the same helmet. This ball is actually from the first time I ever played baseball. I found it actually right outside our baseball park.
I like the dirty baseball with the princess crowns.
Yes, oh yeah.
That's a cool look.
It's just right in the middle, yep. In my bag right here is my baseball glove that I have been playing with for a long time. I've had it for quite a while. It's pretty old, but it's definitely a good glove. I've loved it forever. That's probably why I haven't gotten rid of it yet. If it's a pop fly, so it's one that's in the air, you want to make sure that you know where the ball is first. You don't want to be scared of the ball, so you don't want to try and get to the side of the ball and catch it from there. You want to be right underneath it so that you know that it's going to go in your glove. So just try not to be scared of the ball.
How do you feel when you're up to bat?
Oh, it's definitely a little nerve-wracking, especially because I am a pretty good hitter, but sometimes with the right pitcher, it is a little scary. But it's really just, you gotta feel confident, and you gotta know that you're probably gonna hit it, so just do your best.
Are there any girls on your team now?
No, there's not. I'm doing a summer conditioning league right now, and it just ended, but at first it was a little hard to get used to being the only girl and all the boys being there and talking about their boy stuff. But after a while I kind of got used to it.
Do you ever wish there was like a girls baseball league?
Oh, yeah, of course. I would love to have a girls' baseball team because the pitching. I like baseball pitching better than softball pitching just because I feel like it's easier for me to know the pitch since it's overhand than in softball it's underhand, so it's a little bit harder to know what to expect. So it would be pretty cool if they had a girls' baseball team, yeah. Where I'm playing right now, I'm playing in my park behind my house, and the league goes up to 14. So after I'm done with this and I go off to high school, most likely I will be switching over to softball.
How do you feel about that?
Well, sometimes it can be a little sad, but also at the same time, softball is definitely going to be fun because I'll get to play with girls.
What would you tell a 7 or 8-year-old girl who's sitting at home right now who's thinking about starting baseball?
Well, I would tell them to go for it.
We want to thank everyone who tuned in this hour. On Monday, we talk about the Tomato Festival. We'll try to answer the age-old question, is it a fruit or a vegetable? This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harouche, Rose Gilbert, and Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. Shout out to our intern, Doreen Chernecki. Today is her last day, and we want to thank you for all of your great work. You rock. The masterminds behind our theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Coach Gooch. The conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you on Monday, everybody, and be good to each other.